Joumana Kayrouz. You've seen her images on giant billboards across the metro. Joumana Kayrouz. You've seen her images on buses across the city. Now get to know Joumana Kayrouz.
The war broke out in my home country, Lebanon. I was 11 years old, and I saw a lot of bloodshed and inequality and poverty. You can't grow up in an environment like that and not be affected by it and not want to make a difference. I graduated from Yale University with a master's in ethics. I speak 4 languages. It has always been innate in me fighting for the underdog and trying to do whatever it is I can to make a difference in the world.
Let Joumana Kayrouz protect your rights. Call the law offices of Joumana Kayrouz at 1-866-YOUR-RIGHTS extension 100 or visit yourrights.com.
مكتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يبحث عن موظف يتولى مهام الترجمة من الإنجليزية إلى العربية والعكس لمساعدة الموكلين في التواصل مع المحامين. على المتقدم أو المتقدمة لشغل هذه الوظيفة أن يجيد اللغتين العربية والإنجليزية بطلاقة، والخبرة غير ضرورية. الوظيفة بدوام كامل 5 أيام في الأسبوع. للراغبين بشغل هذه الوظيفة الاتصال بمكتب المحامية جومانا كيروز على الرقم 248-557-3645 248-557-3645. برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز المختصة في قضايا حوادث السيارات مع نخبة من المحامين في اختصاصات عدة منها الطلاق والهجرة والإفلاس يأتيكم الآن على الهواء مباشرة. سعدتم مساء مستمعين في كل مكان، أهلا بكم في هذه الحلقة الجديدة من برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. بإمكانكم المشاركة في هذه الحلقة عبر الاتصال على الأرقام 313-769-6666 519-256-1023 وأيضا عن طريق الواتساب والرقم هو 313-327-7074. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتعامل مع قضايا الإصابات الشخصية من ضمنها حوادث السيارات، قضايا إصابة العمل، الأخطاء الطبية، قضايا الهجرة والتجنس والإفلاس، وقضايا الضمان الاجتماعي، وبالإضافة إلى قوانين العائلة. الاستشارات مجانية على الرقم 248-557-3645. تحياتنا لكم. جمانة، مساء الخير.
صباح الخير رامي، يعطيك العافية. كيفك اليوم؟
الله يعافيك، الحمد لله. أخبارك؟ إن شاء الله تمام.
كتر خير الله. صباح الخير لك ولكل المستمعين، وصباح الخير لضيفنا لليوم. استقبلناه الشهر الماضي بديسمبر 16 2020، السنة الماضية، الشهر الماضي، ومنستقبله اليوم January 27 2021 للمرة الثانية. Good afternoon, Attorney Jay Yaso. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Joumana. I'm doing well. I hope you're well.
We are very blessed. Thank God for all his blessings. Happy New Year to you. You were with us on the air on December 16 of last year, and you are on today. So this is your first time in the new year. Happy New Year to you and your family.
Thank you so much, and Happy New Year's to you.
Thank you. تقريبا مرة بالشهر، شهر ونص، عم نرجع نستقبل المحامي جاي ياسو اللي اختصاصي لأكثر من 30 سنة بقضايا الإصابات الشخصية، وبالتحديد قضايا الميديكال مالبراكتس، يعني الأخطاء الطبية، إن كانت خطأ طبي نابع عن طبيبة أو جراح أو مستشفى أو ممرض أو فرمشية إلى آخره. هو ضيفنا مرة بالشهر، مرة كل شهر ونص، والشخص اللي بريد يتكلم معه بيقدر يتصل على مكتبنا. رقم التليفون هو 248-557-3645. كمان مرة رقم المكتب 248-557-3645. Attorney Jay Yaso, we say that we told the listeners that you represent injured people as a result of a medical mistake. How about suing pharmaceutical companies for a defective medication or for a faulty piece of equipment, perhaps planted in the body, say, a heart device or something like that? Do we do those? Can we do them here in Michigan or not?
Well, we are somewhat limited in Michigan. Back in 1993, 94, tort reform was passed in Michigan. It's just a fancy legal term that basically means civil reform. And part of that included product liability reform, which is what you're kind of referencing when you're talking about medications and medical devices and things of that nature. Um, as I understand it, and we don't really do a lot of product liability work anymore because of this law, but essentially any product that's put in the stream of commerce that is FDA approved that causes an injury to anybody in Michigan, unfortunately, we can't sue under Michigan courts. So a medication or a hard device or whatever. So, but we do from time to time, depending on the nature of the claim, we may align ourselves with law firms outside the state because these cases can be brought in other jurisdictions, and we may assist other law firms. But in Michigan, unfortunately, we are precluded from bringing these cases.
Okay, thank you very much for that piece of clarification.
Sure.
القانون تغير بال 1994 في ميشيغان وما بقى يسمح للمحاميين يقيموا دعاوى بالمحاكم هون في ولاية ميشيغان لأي دواء أو أي medical product صار عليه ريكول، يعني اكتشف أو سيارة كان في إذا تقريبا من جمعة رامي بفتكر فورد was it Ford Attorney Yaso was it Ford that did a huge recall on one of its cars about a week ago?
Yeah, but now we're getting into a little bit different area. So recently I think there may have been some Ford recalls. I know there's been some airbag recalls recently, but now we're getting outside the FDA.
Yes, that's not FDA approved, correct.
Correct. So those cases, if to give you an example, if there's a car that's putting out vehicles with bad brakes and they're causing injuries, we can sue under Michigan law. But clearly, those are product liability cases, and you can bring those cases here. But food and drug products, and all along the road there, those that come through the stream of commerce again are protected under Michigan law.
اوكي سو القانون هون بميشيغان من 1994 ما بيسمح بقى انه نقيم دعوى ضد pharmaceutical company لانه عاطيه دواء سحبته بعدين من الماركت لانه عم بيسبب وفاه او في شيء غلط الى اخره. سو هؤلاء الكيسز إجمالا بيكون في كلاس أكشن خارج الولايات المتحدة. كلاس أكشن يعني في كتير مرضى عندهم عم بيواجهوا ذات العوارض أو ذات المشاكل فبيشملوا بعضهم بدعوة واحدة in federal court بيسموها كلاس أكشن. ممكن يكون فيها مئات الأشخاص، ممكن يكون فيها ألوفات الأشخاص، عشرات ألوفات الأشخاص، ملايين الأشخاص حسب شو البرودكت liability. أي شيء that has been food and drug administration approved نحن هون بميشيغان ما فينا نقيم دعاوي. سو يا منلاقي للموكل مكتب محاماة إجمالا نيو جيرسي كاليفورنيا بيقوموا هؤلاء الدعاوي. in the right case يمكن نترك الكيس بس نكون off counsel لمكتب المحاماة اللي هو بولاية تاني قايم class action lawsuit. هيدي أول نقطة بدنا نوصلها. تاني نقطة بدنا نوصلها يمكن ولا مرة حكينا عنها نحن على الهوا. أنا بواجهها من وقت إلى آخر يمكن مرة بالشهر، والمحامي جياسو عم بيقول إنه واجهها هالأسبوع كمان. رح طبعا نغير شوي الحذافير، رح أحكي معه بالإنجليزي وبعدين رح نترجمها للعربي. So one of the issues that we wanted to talk about today, Jay, at greater detail than ever before, and I certainly experienced the same situation maybe about once a month. People will come to our firm, people will come to you, and they, we don't go out, we don't go after anybody, we don't solicit anybody. That's illegal, unethical. People choose to pick up the phone and call and say, I need legal representation for a car accident or for a medical mistake. Every once in a while, people will hedge, and after they decide to retain us, they change their mind because the family tells them, no, we need to leave this matter in God's hands, or the family decides that it's not good from a religious standpoint to do anything about this, or the culturally they decide that no. And I think they use a phrase. What's that phrase? I can tell you what the phrase in Arabic is, but what is that phrase in English when they change their mind and they don't want to proceed because of religious or cultural reasons? What do they say in English?
I'm trying to think what that is. I'm not. I can't recall.
Yeah, you in preparing for the show you didn't mention it, but I can tell you what they say in Arabic. انا كل شيء بدي يكون دغري، انا كل شيء بدي يكون صح، انا كل شيء ما بدي احتال على القانون، انا ما بدي العب، انا ما بدي اخذ اكثر من حقي. So they say all of these things uh, to us, and they say them in English. I don't want I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to cheat the system. I don't want to
Right.
take advantage. I don't want to. I don't know what else they would say.
Yeah.
But
No, I think I used the term cultural stigma when we talked earlier.
well, that's yes, but I think they use a phrase to you. That's okay. It will come.
I think they said it might be like it's God's will. It was in the hands of God. My experience, just like yours, really is dealing with a lot of cultural people. I don't get this a lot.
And by the way, we're one of them. You're Iraqi and I'm Lebanese,
Absolutely.
so we're talking
Absolutely.
about our own people.
Our own people, and so
And other cultures,
other cultures, whether it be the Hispanic Americans or Chinese Americans. And if they're first generation, it's a little bit more to deal with than when it's second and third. But
Correct.
Essentially, what you get is this, and I call it a cultural stigma. That is, if you sue, somehow you're a bad person. That our family are not the suing type, and what happened here, can't be corrected. And that it's in God's hands. You get those kinds of responses.
They also say, "I don't want problems. ما بدي مشاكل." That's another comment they make. Yes.
Right. And what I always try to impress upon our clients, and just like you mentioned, is that we're not calling you. You're calling us, and we are lawyers. We are licensed professionals who are here to provide a service to you. You are doing absolutely nothing wrong by talking to a lawyer and trying to get answers to some questions. And what we tell them more often than not is there's a system in this country that is built to protect you when you're injured.
Right. There are laws that give you your rights. Yes.
Absolutely. In other countries, they may not have them. I've told my children that I've actually seen public hanging, which is nothing I want anyone to see.
Yes.
In Iraq. Yes. And that's because there's not much of a justice system there, if there's any. Here, there's a tremendous, judicial system, as we're coming to see even on a national level with the Constitution and what have you. But this is a system built to protect people's rights. And just like your slogan, they're your rights, and you come to us for us to try to protect you. And so don't think you're doing anything wrong by seeking the advice of a lawyer in these cases.
Right. The firm slogan is know your rights and act accordingly. Let's be very clear. People have the right to come to a lawyer, hire the lawyer, and change their mind. We respect that. That's not a problem. We're talking today, we're not trying to shame people who do that. People sometimes hedge and have second thoughts or may decide to choose another law firm. We respect people. The point here is that sometimes they don't want to look into what the laws are and whether there were violations of the laws for them or their loved ones, because they think that they are doing something bad or because they are cheating the system. Let's be very clear. We are lawyers. So as lawyers, we are supposed to know the laws and keep abreast of the ever-changing laws, one, and two, advise you what we believe your rights are within the context of the laws. So just like you don't want problems and just like you don't want to cheat the system, nor do we. We have licenses to upkeep as well. So when you come to a lawyer in the United States, the lawyer is supposed to work within the confines of the laws. There are laws on almost everything in this country, and they tell you what your responsibilities are and what your rights and privileges are. So when you seek a consultation with an attorney, who's supposed to be knowledgeable in the area you're seeking a consultation in, the lawyer will tell you what the law is and the lawyer will tell you what your benefits are. Can we briefly talk, obviously changing a little bit the facts, about let's tell the story of the person who came to us and changed his mind and so forth. Let's put it in context a little bit.
Sure. It's really a real sad story with respect to his wife, a very young woman in her 30s who was recently diagnosed with cancer in the blood or leukemia. And short story, she was transferred to a cancer hospital here in the area, and they started treatment on her, chemotherapy. And it was during the first chemotherapy session that she became unconscious, and she arrested and remained in that condition for about 35 days. And so when I met the family, it was really just the husband, just a wonderful individual.
You mean the widower? Because she died.
But she did die 2 days ago, believe it or not. But when I had met him, she was still alive. Yes. And at that time, I had a great conversation with him. I told him I didn't know if we can help him or not. I mean, we would clearly do an investigation, but we didn't know whether or not he had a case. And we said we'd be more than happy to help him. And so after he signed the agreement to have us work with him, he called me the following day and said that his wife's sisters or sister-in-law and their family really was against us or against him contacting our law firm because they don't really believe in these kinds of things. That is, lawsuits.
That's your phrase. They don't believe in these kinds of things. That's exactly what you said.
Okay, and that because she was in a comatose condition, that it was in God's hands, and no lawyer can fix this. And so we really don't want.
No lawyer can fix this.
Right.
Yeah.
And the decision was that they did not want to go through with a potential investigation and a lawsuit. So they changed their mind.
And this person, I believe, was of Lebanese or Iraqi descent, correct?
Of Iraqi descent, correct. And I can tell you that after she passed, I got a call back from the husband again and said the family was all on board again and that they wanted us to open up the file and to conduct our investigation. So I don't know what happened in the background, but minds were being changed within a matter of hours. So that's the part I think really I think people need to understand is that you do have these rights. Don't think you're doing anything wrong. And yes, some things.
And neither are we helping you to do anything wrong.
Right.
As lawyers.
Right.
We're just telling you what the law says and whether there's been a violation of the law, and if the violation of the law is what caused the death, and what the financial compensation under the law will be. So our framework is the law.
Right. We told your audience, you and I, Joumana, a long time ago that when patients go to the hospitals or see doctors in a hospital setting, a lot of times they don't know what's going on. Something goes on, nobody really tells them. So I always say that lawyers are like, that house inspector that comes to inspect the house before you buy it. We're the investigators that will pull up all the medical records and investigate everything to be able to give you, as the grieving family, some answers as to why your loved one is in a comatose condition or why somebody has just passed.
Okay, we're going to continue commenting on this because we want to invite the listeners to look at this another way. So the gentleman who came and signed up and then changed his mind, and again, everybody has the right to do that, but this is not about whether you have the right or not. This is about analyzing how this person and his family felt about what's going on. And believing in these types of things. We're going to present a few thoughts of a different perspective. I can take two people, the grieving husband who almost gave in into the family belief that this is in God's hands. We don't believe in these kinds of things. And I can give you another person who is going to analyze this differently, who is going to say, I need to know what's going on. I need closure. Maybe the doctor did not do anything wrong. And then it was really God's will. another person who might say, by doing this, I'm improving the system because to the extent that my wife was wronged, I don't want this doctor to commit harm to any other mom, to any other wife. And this young mother left three young children, one of which is 9 months old. So it's a different perspective that we're gonna talk about. However, we have a caller, so we're gonna switch gears for a minute and revisit this question. We have Mr. Ahmed on the phone. Is Ahmed? يا أهلا وسهلا.
يعطيكم العافية.
الله يعافيك. تفضل.
بس عندي سؤال بليز. أنا صار عندنا كيس من حوالي 10 سنين بالضبط. كانت مرتي ولدت وبعد شهر صار عندها زايدة. دخلناها على المستشفى على أساس يعملوها الزايدة، ويومتها الدكتور ما عمل العملية يلي هي العادة traditional way اللي بيصير جراحة. كانوا عم يجربوا تكنيك جديد إنه يعملوا عملية الزايدة بدون جراحة، وخلال العملية غلط وقص محل غير الزايدة، يعني قص مصران. تمام. ومن بعدها يعني لما سكر وخلص العمليه وصار في مثل تشوه بمكان العمليه وهيك، لانه ما انعملت العمليه بالطريقه صح. نحن حطينا يومتها محامي، بس للاسف نحن ما كنا هون بالبلد، كنا عايشين ببلد ثاني، وجربنا نتابع معه المحامي هذا ما كثير اهتم. الكيس هلا من اول وجديد ولا لا؟ لانه مرق عليها وقت.
Oh, yes. Okay. So thank you, Ustaz Ahmad. Mr. Ahmad is, I like his question because it touches upon several things. It touches upon statute of limitation and how long you have to pursue a medical malpractice case. It touches upon maybe known risks attendant to surgeries. It touches upon innovative techniques. If a doctor or a surgeon chooses an innovative technique or an innovative treatment, how does the law of medical malpractice look at that? So Mr. Ahmad's wife gave birth about 10 years ago, and a month after she left the hospital, she was told that she had an appendix, so she needed an appendix surgery. The doctor apparently uses a quote-unquote new technique for the appendix surgery and inadvertently cut the colon or one of the colons, large intestine, small intestine, I'm not sure, causing disfigurement, and I'm not sure what else. They hired a lawyer at the time. However, they were out of the country and they did not pursue it. He wants to know, number one, can he do anything about it 10 years later? We're going to break down this question into several comments. Number one, can he start this all over again? Yes or no?
No.
No, because in a medical malpractice case, an adult person, has 2 years from when the negligence happened or 6 months from when they discovered that there was the possibility of negligence, correct?
Correct. And that 6 month discovery is capped at about 6 years. So you don't have 6 months to discover forever.
Only within the first 6 years.
Correct. That's correct.
However, he will have discovered it immediately because he's talking about disfigurement, notwithstanding whether the disfigurement was a big enough injury or not. So the first question, Mr. Ahmad, no, the time is gone. You have 2 years from when the negligence you suspect took place, or 6 months within the first 6 years of when you discovered it. I'll give an example. A sponge. You can't discover that somebody left a sponge in you right away. You have 6 months from when you discover it, but no more than 6 years. The next question is, can a surgeon use a new technique? And is the law more lenient with the surgeon because it's a newer technique and we don't know as much about it, or no?
No, absolutely not. Medical doctors who are using innovative or new techniques have to be trained by those innovative. They have to go to seminars or do some hands-on training so that they can be experts. These surgeons are working on people's bodies, and if you make a mistake, something is going to go wrong. So the standard of care doesn't change whether or not you're using an old technique or a new technique. You're just supposed to make sure that you don't, injure the patient in a way that's not reasonable under the circumstance, which kind of leads me to the part of the question that you were talking about with risks involved. So this new technique, where they cut the colon, I don't know what part of the colon they cut, but if it's the part of the colon that's closest to the appendix, because the
Right.
colon, then that might be a colon that's in the field of vision, and the doctors or experts might say that this is a risk in the procedure. So it all depends. You'd have to take a little bit closer look at the operative report
Sure.
and
And
from
the
the
anatomy.
correct, exactly.
اوكي سو تاني نقطة، أول شيء الإنسان عنده فقط سنتين من وقت ما صار الإهمال، أو منشك إنه اللي صار هو إهمال. أوقات ما بنقدر نكتشف الإهمال دغري، مثل مثلا الإنسان اللي بيكون عند الجراح والجراح بيترك شيء بقلب بطنه أو بقلب جسده. صدق أو لا تصدق رامي it happens.
مهم.
one of the cases بغير ولاية بجورجيا، بفتكر جاي عمل تسوية $750,000. زيت الكيس هون بميشيغان يمكن التسوية $150,000، مش زيت القيمة. but putting that aside for a minute، أوقات الواحد ما بيعرف الإهمال، ما بيكتشفه إلا من بعد مدة معينة. ساعتها عنده 6 شهور من وقت ما اكتشف الإهمال، بس لا أكثر من 6 سنوات من وقت ما صار الإهمال. So أول جواب أستاذ أحمد، the answer is no. It's very 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 late. It's 8 years too late. That's number one. Number two، إنه هي نيو تكنيك ما بتهين الأمور على الجراح. مفروض يعمل العملية بطريقة مهنية. أما بالنسبة إنه something went wrong وخزق جزء من المصران هون، يمكن من النون ريسكس، يعني من كل عملية عندها ريسكس، كل عملية عندها مخاطرها. وفي كتير مخاطر معروفة. يعني قبل ما الإنسان يعمل العملية بيمضوه ورقة إنه these are the risks and he gives his informed consent إنه he agrees to those risks. لربما القط كولن مطرح ما قطش يمكن قريب كتير على الزايدة، بيقولوا بالإنجليزي يمكن was within the field of vision، يعني ضمن نظر الجراح. كمان مرة كل ما بيقربوا الأماكن الجسدية للمكان اللي عم نعمل فيه العملية، كل ما في خطر إنه الجراح بالغلط يخزق شيء مجاور عليه. هون بيكون بدنا الاوبراتيف ريبورت لنقدر نعرف قد ايه بعيد. طبعا هذا الكلام كله هلا ما عاد له طعمه لانه مرق الوقت، بس احنا عم نستعمل هذا الاتصال كاكزامبل، كمثل لكل المستمعين. إذا كان محل اللي انقطش المصران قريب كتير للزايدة، صارت أصعب إنه نقدر نحمل المسؤولية على الدكتور. بس كل ما بعد كل ما صار أهين نحمل المسؤولية، إنه شو it's not within your field of vision، ليه هالقد بعدت. now مش لأنه نقطة من النقاط اللي بدنا كنا نوصلها اليوم، مش لأنه a risk is known is a well known risk معناتها انه الدكتور او الجراح gets a free card، انه بيطلع الدكتور ما حق عليه. حتى لو مطرح ما قطش للمصران قريب كتير على الزايدة و is within the field of vision، هيدا ما بيعني حتى لو زوجتك مضيت ورقة بتقول انه قبل ما تعمل عملية انه في احتمال انه الاماكن المجاورة للزايدة يتعرضوا ل رابتشر او كات، ما معناتها انه الجراح ما عاد عنده مسؤوليه بتاتا. مثل ما كان عم بيقول المحامي ياسو من شهر ونص، بس ما حكيناها على الهوا. just because رح اقولها بالانجليزي ورح ترجمها على العربي، رح اخذ رايه فيها او اخذ تعليقه ورح ترجمها على العربي. نقطه كتير مهمه، ما في عمليه ما إلها known risks. ما بيعني انه صار الريسك يعني الجراح مش مغلط. He put it best, Attorney Yaso put it best when he said, even if you have a known risk, that does not mean you can get away with it. That means you have to pay closer attention to the likelihood of that happening. Is that correct, Attorney Yaso?
Well, yes. I mean, I always say to the juries when we're trying cases is that hospitals don't have signs in front of them that say, we only treat healthy people. Okay. Everyone that walks in that door has some illness, has some comorbidities, has some condition. And so there's risks to those patients when they have surgeries. If you're a diabetic patient, there's a risk to you that, your blood sugars may get high. Or if you're on blood thinners that you might bleed. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So doctors have to be aware, and they have to try to protect against some of those risks.
So
Like
when a
that.
doctor, yes,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so when a surgeon knows, let's assume that that part of the colon was close enough to the appendix. If a surgeon knows that that neighboring colon is at higher risk, that is not, that does not mean that doctor gets a get out of jail card and gets away with it. That should get the doctor to pay even closer attention to the fact that there may be a possibility of risk to the neighboring body parts, correct?
Correct. You get these defenses such as, oh, this particular patient's body habitus, the formation of their body is different. There's an anomaly there. The colon is supposed to come down here, but it was moving in a different direction. You get all kinds of defenses. But unless you see films and, x-rays and, MRIs of how the colon is shaped, we really, think mostly everyone's anatomy is kind of built the same way.
And since we're talking about known risks, let's talk about this case that I was so anxious about talking about last time, from a lady from the Middle Eastern community who had scoliosis. And she went to a Middle Eastern orthopedic surgeon. Did we lose Jay?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, I do apologize.
That's good.
So she went to a Middle Eastern orthopedic surgeon to correct. So scoliosis is like a curvature that she was born with in her spine. She went to a Middle Eastern orthopedic surgeon to correct the scoliosis. Unfortunately, he did a 10 over 10 for correcting the scoliosis, and he got she lost her leg. Can you tell us exactly what happened?
Sure. And doctors will tell you these are long, complicated surgeries. Scoliosis.
It was a 12-hour surgery, wasn't it?
Was a 12-hour surgery, and they'll tell you sometimes ahead of time that sometimes we have to do these maybe in two sittings. Sometimes we can do them in just one sitting to one 12-hour period. But long and short of it is that this was a woman in her mid-50s who, had basically grown up with a curvature of the spine called scoliosis. She kind of was born with it and never really decided to do anything about it until it started to bother her later in life. So she went in for surgery. And just like you had indicated, the surgeon did a remarkable job correcting her spine. They had to, revise it in 2 or 3 different levels from the top to the bottom. But that again, the 12-hour surgery involves you being on your back for about the first 3 or 4 hours, and then they flip you over for the next 7 or 8 hours where you're on your stomach. The malpractice in this case, according to our medical experts, occurred right at the beginning of the surgery when she was on her back. In order to get to your lower spine when you're on your back, they have to do an opening right through your belly, right below your belly button area, above the pubic area. And they open it there so that the surgeon can get a visual of your spine, your lower spine. And the person who does this is that does the openings, either a general surgeon or a vascular surgeon. So they come in before the neurosurgeon comes in, and they do the opening. And what happened here is, again, without getting too technical, they use retractors or tools to keep the surgical site open so that you can operate. They're like clamps, if you will, in a wood shop. They kind of hold things together. Well, here they clamped the iliac artery, which is one of the main source of delivery of blood to the lower leg from your heart. And they clamped that artery, and so it basically occluded or prevented the blood from traveling. And they left it like that for a while, and then for hours. And then finally, when they turned her over, they worked on her back. Long and short of it is that this injury occurred right at the beginning of the surgery, and it cut off the blood supply. By the time surgery was over, this woman had no sensation or feelings in her lower extremity. She was still unconscious, but all the examinations that they were doing on her indicated that she had no pulses in that leg. And within 24 hours of that back surgery, she ended up having her right leg amputated.
So the scoliosis surgery was a success, but one of the known risks of that surgery was that you could lose blood flow to your legs. So the surgeon, the neurosurgeon, knew about it. And although it's a known risk that she signed off to, your argument is that's not a reason for him to get away with it. That's a reason for him to raise his guard more up and to pay attention to it. So those clamps, he should have used a different technique or moved her around or removed the clamps to allow blood to come back. He should have been aware, knowing very well that this is a well-known risk. You prepare for it. You work extra hard against it happening, not get away with it, correct?
Yeah. So the medical literature, there's articles written about how when you're doing this surgery and when you're doing the opening and you have to clamp, that one of the part of the anatomy that gets in the way are the arteries, the iliac arteries. And so doctors have to be awakened to the fact that this might happen. So you've got to look at it and protect that area and move the tissue around so that you don't clamp it. But the other important thing about this is that the patient again is under the control of the doctors. She is under anesthetic. She has no way to tell anybody how she's feeling, or whether or not she has any feelings in her leg. And so what they're supposed to do, and they failed to do that in this case as well, was that they're supposed to put what they call pulse oximeters on the toes. And that's just a way of seeing, in fact, if there's any blood oxygen going down, and any blood flow to the lower extremity. And there's all kinds of sensors that they can put on the leg to make sure that the blood is flowing. They had none of this on this woman for 12 hours. They didn't even monitor her. And it was not a surprise to anybody that, she came down with this because nobody saw it coming. So yes, so the risk, there's always a risk of bleeding. There's always risk of infection with any surgery, but this type of risk is avoidable. This is not something that you would generally accept. You want doctors to know that putting clamps in this area have to be done in such a way so as you prevent the doctor from clamping the iliac artery. It's just something it's well published now in literature.
Thank you. We are talking with Attorney Jay Yaso, our medical malpractice expert, 30-some years in experience at one of the very prestigious law firms here in Michigan, Summers and Schwartz. Before we take a break, I'm going to translate this story into Arabic. And then I want to go back to this cultural thing, religious thing about we don't do this type of thing. رامي كان عم بيخبرنا عن ملف عنا إياه من سيدة من الجالية. كان عندها سكوليوسيس، يعني خلقانة عندها بظهرها it's like an S، مثل مش العمود الفقري مش دغري، هو فايت لجوا like an S. وصلت لوقت بالعمر، عمرها 40 سنة، ما عاد فيها تتحمل، قررت تعمل عملية. راحت عند نيوروسيرجن من الجالية العربية والكلدانية وعمل لها عملية استغرقت 12 ساعة. العملية كانت كتير ناجحة، عملية السكوليوسيس كانت كتير ناجحة، وإنما للأسف ظهرت واضطروا يقطشوا لها إجرها. ليه؟ من الوقت اللي بينعمل عملية من هالنوع بدهم يفتحوا البطن من قدام، ولا يتركوا البطن مفتوح بيستعملوا ملاقط، كلامب، ملقط من اليمين وملقط من اليسار لحتى يقدر الجراح يشوف شو فيه. هيدول الملاقط مطرح ما بيحطوا الملاقط معروف انه في شريان اسمه the iliac artery. هيدا الشريان بينقل دم من القلب للرجل للإجر. So قبل ما تعمل العملية مضوع انه من ال known complications من هاي العملية انه في احتمال انه يروح الدم لاجريها وممكن تخسر اجريها، وهي مضيت على هذا الشيء. وانما نحن قايمين دعوة بهذا الموضوع. ليه؟ لانه اللي مفروض يصير انه وقت اللي الجراح بيعرف انه في عارض ممكن يصير، هيدا ما بيعني انه الجراح بيقدر يتناسى هيدا العارض، هيدا ما بيعني انه الجراح بيقدر يمشي بالعملية بلا ما ياخد بعين الاعتبار شو بيقدر يعمل within his control لحتى يخفف نسبة انه هيدا العارض يصير. مشان هيك قال المحامي جياسو بالانجليزي a well-known risk does not mean you get away with it as a doctor or a surgeon. It means you pay extra attention to it. So كان في أجهزة كان مفروض هذا الجراح النيوروسيرجن يستعملها، هي نايمة وتحت البنش 12 ساعة، ما فيها تقول لهم إذا إجريها عم يتحركوا ولا لا. صحيح إن لازم يحطوا الملائط، بس كان فيهم وكان لازم وكان المفروض منهم يفحصوا الإجرين. كيف بدهم يفحصوا الإجرين إذا هي نايمة في مثل شوكس تقريبا بهالمعنى، ويمكن أنا عم بستعمل كلمة الغلط، بحطوها على الإجرين تو ميجر إذا كان الدم والأكسجين عم يوصل على الإجرين. 12 ساعة ولا مرة فكروا يستعملوا هيدا الجهاز ليشوفوا إذا بعد الدم عم يوصل على الإجرين. So yes, it's a well-known risk, but this is a risk that had the doctor done what he should have done by using the equipment on her leg to measure whether the blood and the oxygen was flowing to her leg, would have been able to avoid it, would have been able to catch it immediately and reverse the flow and allow the flow. But by the time they discovered it, what was the window for them, Attorney Yaso, to fix this?
It had to, keep in mind, they had the clamps on for about 3 or 4 hours. So it was probably, she probably only had during the first 2 hours is how long they had to unclamp it and try to get circulation back in that leg.
So they had a very small window.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a very powerful example. Again, just because there is a well-known risk is not a reason for a surgeon to say, oh, well, you signed off to it, I can get away with it. No, it is a reason for him or her to pay even more attention and see what they can do to avoid that risk from becoming a risk, avoiding that possibility. A risk is just a possibility. That does not mean that we cannot eliminate it. Is that a good way to put it?
Correct. And again, doctors can get away with, let's say, if a patient bleeds, that's a risk, or if a patient has an infection.
But don't you dare fail to timely diagnose it afterwards.
Diagnose the bleeding or diagnose the infection, correct? Because that's
right.
When you can get into trouble. If you don't do that and treat it, then the patient can bleed to death. Now you're held accountable.
correct. حتى في عوارض مثل مثلا أي عملية يمكن الواحد ينزف منها، يمكن الجراح ما يقدر يمنع النزيف، مش مثل هون الleg amputation كان في يستعمل الأدوات لحتى ما يصير ما يصير اللي صار. في أوقات بيصير في risks ما بيقدر عليهم الجراح، مثلا bleeding، but إذا الجراح بعد ما يبين عوارض من بعد العملية did not accurately diagnose, did not fail to timely diagnose and treat، هون صار الإهمال. يعني في أوقات عوارض ما بيقدر الجراح يتحشاها، بس أول ما يبلش المريض يتذمر عن بعض الأمور، هون المسؤولية على الحكيم أو الجراح والمستشفى إنه to timely، يعني بالوقت المناسب while it still matters, while it can still make a difference، diagnose، يشخصوا إنه في نزيف and treat، يعالجوا النزيف. بناخد وقفة سريعة وبنرجع للموضوع اللي بلشنا فيه مع الشخص اللي توفت زوجته، والله يرحمها على فكرة، والله يكون معهم ومع عائلتها ومع أولادها، 3 أولاد صغار، وكيف غير رأيه وشو قالنا كيف ممكن ننظر أو البرسبكتيف على هذا الموضوع أو possible perspectives على هذا الموضوع.
مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتمنى لكم السلامة في ظل انتشار وباء كوفيد-19. المحامية جومانا كيروز مثلت على مدى 22 عاما ضحايا حوادث السيارات مع طاقم من المحامين ذوي الخبرة، وحصلت لموكليها على تعويضات بمئات الملايين من الدولارات. قبل أن تختار المحامي الذي سيدافع عن قضيته، دقق في تاريخه المهني. ومع مكاتب جومانا كيروز ستنذهل بآراء مئات الموكلين وخبراتهم الإيجابية في جوجل ريفيوز. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يتحدثون لغتك العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645 والاستشارة مجانية. مكتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يبحث عن موظف يتولى مهام الترجمة من الإنجليزية إلى العربية والعكس لمساعدة الموكلين في التواصل مع المحامين. على المتقدم أو المتقدمة لشغل هذه الوظيفة أن يجيد اللغتين العربية والإنجليزية بطلاقة، والخبرة غير ضرورية. الوظيفة بدوام كامل 5 أيام في الأسبوع. للراغبين بشغل هذه الوظيفة الاتصال بمكتب المحامية جومانا كيروز على الرقم 248-557-3645 248-557-3645. Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. عودة إلى برنامج Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. للمشاركة في البرنامج أرقام الهواتف في الاستوديو 313-769-6666 من وينزر كندا 519-256-1023 على الواتساب 313-327-7074 ورقم المكتب 248-557-3645. نرجع لك جمانة.
شكرا رامي. نحن مع المحامي جاي ياسو، اختصاصي بالأخطاء الطبية. Attorney Jay Yaso, specialist in medical malpractice. Thank you very much for joining us today. Such amazing, powerful, and informative information, raising awareness, nothing more. One of the questions that we started with the show was about the gentleman who came to us because he suspects that his wife suffered some type of negligence in her treatment from blood cancer, and called us a day or two later, changed his mind, and then she passed away, she died, and called us again and wanted us to retain him again. And again, this is not about people's right to change their mind. This is about what he said and what his family thought. When he came to us, he was okay with it. And then when he called and changed his mind, he said something like, my family and my wife's family don't believe in this kind of things. This kind of things is filing a lawsuit or potentially filing a lawsuit. So what we started saying is, we are lawyers. Here in the United States, there are laws. And laws give you responsibilities and also give you rights and privileges. All we can do when you come to us, you choose to come to us, not us. We don't call you. You don't call us. When you come to a lawyer, the lawyer is supposed to tell you what the law is, look at the facts, may not be able to tell you right away if you have a case, especially in a medical malpractice case, because the medical records are pretty much everything, but will tell you what your rights are and, what the lawyer can get you. So this gentleman thought that we don't do this kind of things. What we do, those kind of things, are what the laws here in the United States allow us as lawyers to do. So you hear that phrase, within the bounds of the law. We hear that all the time. What we do is supposed to be within the bounds of the law. So just like our clients don't want these kind of things, we don't want these kind of things if these kind of things are outside the bounds of the law. That's number one. Number two, somebody else could thought about it differently. This gentleman, Attorney Jay Yaso, is not sure. He thinks that the doctors did something wrong, correct?
Correct. He actually doesn't even know. He's not even sure, but he was told that he can pick up his wife 2 hours after he dropped her off, to have chemotherapy. And he gets a call and they said that, your wife has been sent to the emergency room. She is unresponsive. So okay. He didn't know what was going on.
Right. So he expected a different outcome, and now he thinks that maybe someone at the hospital did something wrong. So here is another perspective, another way of looking at this, and to me, a very healthy way. Another way of looking at this is saying, I need closure. Did my wife die because of the negligence of someone, whether it be a nurse or a technician or a doctor or anything like that? Or was it truly God's will? When you come to a lawyer like Jay and he looks at the medical records and consults with his nurses and doctors, if nothing else, he will be able to tell you whether he believes that what happened to his wife is the result of negligence somewhere or not. So actually, a lot of people that we have dealt with over the years, And at the beginning of my career, Jay, I did medical malpractice, by the way. A
Sure.
lot of people who come to you, they're very emotional and they want closure. They want to know what went on. Was that really an accident? Was that really an act of God, 100%? Or did any human somehow hasten the negligence to happen, or the injuries, or the damages, or the death, or whatever it is? And
Right.
a lot of people, even when you tell them there is no case because we don't see that anyone did anything wrong, they feel so much better. It's part of the grieving process to have closure. So going back to this gentleman, if he allowed you, and I know now, he's back, but we're using him as an example. One of two things will happen. It will not cost him any money. Either you will find that no one did anything wrong, or you will find that someone did something wrong. If you find that no one did wrong, he's going to feel a little bit better, feeling that it was truly God's will. So you helped him heal. And if you find that somebody did something wrong, then here is the other thing. Then her death was needless. The death of this mother, the 30 some year old mother, mother of three children, the youngest of which is 9 months old, if you pursue within the bounds of the law a lawsuit for malpractice against the people or the parties in the medical field who we believe are responsible, you are going to improve the system because, number one, if there is a financial recovery, it will help this family and this father of three children. It will help them. It will not bring back the wife. It will not. Yes, lawyers cannot do that. Lawyers, that's why Harry Philo, attorney Yaso, used to say all the time, the true purpose of tort recovery is actually um, the what is the exact the avoidance of a tort, the avoidance of an injury. The true purpose should be um, uh, not getting into an injury, but when that fails. But remember, he used to do a lot of product liability. But when that fails, then money compensation. So it's true. The greatest majority of the time, um, lawyers cannot bring back, somebody who's been wrongfully dead, but money compensation. And sometimes the money compensation, although does not bring the person back, can help the family deal with at least get help, uh, hire people,
Right.
and so forth. But also it can improve the system because it will teach that hospital even by investigating this case, you are improving the system because you're teaching the cancer treatment places of the world to be very careful. And do you know what I'm saying? It's a
Right.
slap. It's a slap on their wrist because it's gonna cause them to re-examine how they did things. You said to me as we're preparing, it will cause them to do peer review. We have 3 minutes remaining. I want you to take the floor from here. That's another way of looking at all this, by the way, which is
Yeah.
not believing in these types of things or God's will. It's always God's will, but sometimes humans have a lot to do with it as well. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jay.
and this, thank you. And this country, we really do have a lot of control because the law is really based upon people's rights, like you said, and their duties and obligations and privileges and all these things. And we're a society that's controlled by law. And if there were no laws, then you'd have chaos
The
and people.
jungle, the law
Yeah,
of the jungle.
exactly. So. Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't understand beyond just seeing that maybe they file a lawsuit and they get compensated is that on the other side, where the doctors and the hospitals are sitting, when they get sued, they're actually doing an internal investigation, and they are trying to police themselves so that the mistakes that they make, don't get repeated again. And the only way they do these investigations is if somebody brings it to their attention, like in a lawsuit. So I tell my clients, you really are serving a much greater purpose than just yourself and your family. You really are protecting other members of society by bringing this to the attention of the hospital's risk management and their lawyers. So I think this country affords us a lot of opportunity to be able to voice our opinion. And in a situation where the family has been injured and they've been aggrieved by the actions of doctors and hospitals, you don't have to sit back and take it. There are laws that will help you, guide you through a litigation process that will try to get you some form of compensation. Like Joumana says, you're not going to bring the family member back, or you're not going to put the leg back on the person who lost a leg. I remember a judge saying to me one time, during a trial, if I can hit my gavel on the bench and bring this person back to life, none of us would be here. But that's
Mhm.
not the real life. I mean, we do in fact go through all of this, and we depend on our laws and on our court systems to be able to right the wrong, if you will.
So beautifully said. I really love today's show. And Rami, maybe we can rerun the show, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, because I really think it merits listening to it
Mhm.
again and again. Attorney Yaso, I cannot thank you enough. I know how precious your time is.
It's
Amazing
my pleasure. It's
information.
always nice to be with you.
The pleasure is ours as well. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you to the caller. And thank you, Rami.